You are watching two humans try to hurt each other, and you cannot look away. Not because you are broken, not because you are violent, but because something ancient inside you, something that was built long before language, long before cities, long before civilization, is watching too. That is what UFC is, not a sport, not entertainment, a mirror. And what it reflects back at you is far darker and far more fascinating than you ever expected. Let's start with a question you have probably never asked yourself. Why does watching a fight feel good? Not just tolerable, not just acceptable, good. There is a reason stadiums fill up. There is a reason pay-per-view numbers break records. There is a reason that even people who say they hate violence will stop and stare when a fight breaks out in a parking lot. Something in the human brain responds to combat, and that response is not a glitch. It is a feature. In 2011, neuroscientist Marco Iacoboni at UCLA published research showing that when humans watch other humans perform physical actions, especially intense, high-stakes physical actions, their mirror neuron systems activate almost as if they were performing those actions themselves. Your brain, watching a fighter take a punch, briefly becomes that fighter. You feel the hit. Not literally, but neurologically, the boundary between observer and participant blurs in a way that no other stimulus quite replicates. That is the first layer, but it goes deeper. Go back 200,000 years. Your ancestor is standing at the edge of a clearing. There is movement in the tall grass. Another group of humans, strangers, has entered the territory. What happens next will determine whether your ancestor eats this week, whether the children survive, whether the group makes it through the dry season. Violence is not a possibility. It is a calculation. Who is stronger? Who will back down? Who will fight? Your ancestor had to watch. Your ancestor had to read every muscle twitch, every shift in posture, every flicker of fear or aggression in another human being's face. The ones who looked away died. The ones who could not stop watching, who could process combat visually and quickly and accurately, survived. You are their descendant. The compulsion to watch a fight is not a character flaw. It is the reason you exist. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham at Harvard spent decades studying the roots of human violence. His research led him to a conclusion that made people deeply uncomfortable. Humans, he argued, are not reluctantly violent. They are selectively violent. Violence was not something that happened to early humans. It was something they chose, strategically, cooperatively, deliberately, when the conditions were right. The groups that were better at organized aggression outcompeted the ones that were not. Violence, over hundreds of thousands of years, shaped the human brain. And the human brain, in turn, shaped violence. UFC did not create that. UFC revealed it. Think about what the Roman Colosseum was. Gladiatorial combat, organized, spectated, cheered, drew tens of thousands of Romans into a single arena. Historians once framed this as a sign of Roman moral decay, but that framing misses the point entirely. Because before Rome, there were Greek pankration fighters competing in the ancient Olympics. Bare-knuckle, nearly unrestricted combat, celebrated as the purest test of a human being. Before Greece, there were Sumerian cylinder seals, some of the oldest artifacts ever found, depicting two men locked in wrestling holds, surrounded by a crowd. The oldest recorded sporting event in human history is a fight. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern, and the pattern keeps showing up because the underlying need never went away. The need to watch, to evaluate, to understand who is capable of what. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt, whose work on moral psychology has reshaped how we understand human behavior, argues that humans have deep intuitive systems for detecting dominance, competence, and physical capability in others. These systems operate below conscious thought. You do not decide to assess a fighter's strength. You just do it, automatically, instantly. Because for most of human history, that assessment could save your life. Here is where it gets stranger. You do not just watch to assess threat. You watch to feel something. Psychologists call it elevation. the emotional response triggered by witnessing extraordinary human performance. The same neural systems that respond to music, to art, to a perfectly told story, also respond to a human being doing something physically remarkable. A perfectly timed counter, a submission hold executed with surgical precision, a comeback from the edge of defeat. These moments do not just satisfy the ancient threat assessment brain. They trigger something else entirely, something closer to awe. That is why you feel it when you watch someone like that perform at the highest level. It is not just violence you are responding to. It is mastery. And mastery, in any form, triggers a response in the human brain that is almost indistinguishable from wonder. But there is still a darker layer, and you have to sit with it for a moment. There is research suggesting that humans, across cultures, across centuries, across completely different social structures, show a baseline fascination with the suffering of others. Not sadism, not cruelty, something more complicated. Psychologist Paul Bloom at Yale calls it a kind of moral curiosity. We are drawn to watch pain in part because pain is information. It tells us what the world is capable of. It calibrates our understanding of risk, of consequence, of what it means to be a body in a world that can hurt you. Watching a fighter get knocked out is uncomfortable. It is supposed to be. That discomfort is doing something. It is updating your internal model of reality. It is teaching your nervous system something it cannot learn from a spreadsheet or a textbook. This is why combat sports exist in every culture that has ever been documented. Not because every culture is broken, but because every culture has nervous systems that run the same ancient software. And here is the truth that UFC is built on, whether its founders knew it or not. Humans need a controlled version of this. A cage, a referee, rules, a bell that ends it. Because the need to witness combat does not go away just because civilization arrived. It just gets redirected. You channel it into an arena. You give it structure. You make it a sport. And in doing so, you make it safe enough to experience without the actual cost of war. The UFC octagon is, in a very real sense, one of humanity's oldest inventions in a modern cage. So the next time you find yourself watching two fighters circle each other, heart rate up, eyes locked, unable to move, do not be ashamed of it. You are not watching something you should not. You are doing exactly what your ancestors did at the edge of a clearing 200,000 years ago. You are watching. You are learning. You are updating your understanding of what humans are capable of. The only difference is that now, there are rules. And the reason UFC exists, the real reason, beneath the sponsorships and the pay-per-view numbers and the highlight reels, is that you were always going to need somewhere to look.